Welcome back to the Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is our ACC preview. I am BuckMetrics, and with me as all is Robert Martin. Robert, I imagine you're staying busy these days with the all kinds of political news, yes?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy the last couple of weeks for sure. And it doesn't seem to be getting better anytime soon, but always good to talk college football. Take a break from my day job and do some college football instead.
It is a nice break, and we have the same guest that helped us on our ACC preview last year, Josh from at CFF Guys. Josh, just remind the folks about yourself, and if you need to plug anything, this is the time and place.
Yeah. My name's Josh. I'm at CFF Guys on X, as you said, and then I also lead the Fantasy Points college football team over on that website. So that's pretty much it, man. We are in the throes, ready for college football to start back up like everybody else, and neck deep in underdog best balls at this point as they've finally released that on their platform. So it's been a fun time to be a college football guy for sure.
We thank you for joining us. You were just awesome last year. Just another guy who lives in the, or I guess to say, eats in the dark spaces of college football, which is where we thrive. So
Yes,
another kindred soul.
I love it.
So we are doing the ACC today, as I said. Conference overview. First, we're going to look at last year's predictions. Robert went 0 for 2.
But
Yes, go ahead, but go ahead.
this is the thing, right? I did go over 2, but I'd say a relatively large asterisk there on Duke. That was definitely directionally correct, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, 0-2, but okay, there's like some small pity points there maybe.
80 points. Okay, Josh and I had Florida State correctly. We all, I think, bought into the Clemson brand, maybe a little bit too much. And we'll be interested to see how that plays out this year. Graphic for the ACC overview. Okay, his name is there. Are either of you familiar with Mr. John Cooper here?
Definitely heard the name and remember that he was a legend as a coach, but not super familiar myself.
Okay. Robert, is this like asking you about Caddyshack, where you're like, what are you talking about, old guy?
Yet another day, yet another old reference that it's just a
Yeah.
bit before my. I know a lot of references, but every time it's no, I have no idea what this is.
Okay. So John Cooper was the Ohio State coach from 1988 to 2000. And any idea at all why I would be, aside from just showcasing an awesome pair of slacks here, why I would be showcasing an Ohio State coach when we're talking about the ACC? Any idea? 1988 to 2000. No ACC ties. It's not that. I can tell you that.
Is
Okay.
1988 when Florida State joined the ACC?
No, they joined later. So John Cooper was the head coach at Ohio State for 13 years. And it is amazing. I literally have fact checked this like 10 times because it's so unreal. 13 years as the Ohio State head coach, he went to one Rose Bowl. I can't imagine. I don't, they would have gone through 6 coaches in that time span, I think, with only one Rose Bowl. So why do I bring that up in the context of the ACC? We see this every once in a while where you've got talented teams, and every year preseason watch out for Ohio State. And at the end of the year, what was I thinking? Their head coach is John Cooper. What was I thinking? And we know a lot of instances like that. We've got a lot of that in the ACC. A lot of that in the ACC. I think that this conference, the contention runs deep, as we say in horse racing. You can find the participants in the title game going way down the list, as far as I think, because there's a lot of John Cooper questions/answers to each team here.
Love
With
it.
that, we'll get into this a little more. We always offer a glossary here, so if you want to understand what the heck I'm talking about when I talk about Ryan, Apex, and all kinds of GGAB stuff, stop, take a picture of this, do a screen grab, save it to your LeanTossup Sharpest College Football workbook that you are keeping and adding to every week, and refer to it back thusly. So here's the overview of the conference from a metric standpoint, and we'll get into most of these teams sooner, or deeper, some more than others. At the end, some of these we'll just get into a little bit. As I said, vulnerable conference favorites, and basically I think every team's got some kind of vulnerability. Add SMU, Cal, and Stanford from last year, and some key quarterback departures as well. Also, I don't know if it was like in our first year, Robert, I called the ACC just bloated and unwieldy, and even more bloated and unwieldy now with with the natural fits of SMU, Cal, and Stanford?
Yeah, it's a very weird mix. Obviously, when you look at other conferences, SEC is the definition of this, right? It makes sense. They're all in the same area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Big Ten, it's like the Midwest and Friends. This one is, I don't know, right? It's some stuff in the South, some stuff in the North,
Yeah.
some West Coast friends, and then randomly SMU from Texas for some reason. It's a weird mishmash. At least the Big 12, at least there's like some. Okay, West Virginia's the outlier, but okay, if you just ignore West Virginia, everything else makes sense. Maybe Cincinnati to some extent, but okay, if you exclude those, everything else makes sense. But here is just we're just all over the map, right? And this is the future of college football. But at the same point in time, when you look at it's such a weird conference where there's so very clearly a top whatever to this conference, maybe 5 or 6 teams, and then everything else is I don't know if this team's going to a bowl, right? There is such a clear gap between good teams in this conference and then this is not going to go well teams, and it's concerning, I think, and we're gonna see that this year.
Yeah, Josh, as a Miami guy, what's your temperature towards the additions of SMU, Cal, and Stanford? Positive, negative, indifferent?
Yeah, I think it's just you added 3 teams to the conference, and that's about it. I mean, SMU is probably the best add from a athletic standpoint, at least football standpoint, and even they lost to a bottom tier to me ACC team in a bowl game last year. Now they didn't have their starting quarterback, but yeah, so it doesn't do much for me. I do have an SMU in the conference, but that's just because I might get closer to a Miami football game because I'm also in Texas.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Okay. All right, so let's get to the team previews. First team to go over, Florida State, last year's champ, last year's champion of the screw job trophy as well from the playoff committee. In their 4th season under Mike Norvell, they lose Jordan Travis. He was 22nd in all of FBS and Apex last season. Concern that goes with that is the good quarterback play that goes, or the luck that goes with good quarterback play. Quarterback departs. You could see some serious regression of almost three wins just on that alone. Replaced by DJ Uyunglele. We talked about during the season last season, he was miserable against Washington and Oregon. 38 Apex in those 2 games and 145 the rest of the season. We'll come back to that in a moment. They lost the 16th most Ryan in FBS. They had a little bit of addition, but not much. They were 73rd in that, so they're one of the Ryan losers from last year. Their defense actually improved quite a bit in the latter half of the season. I think they were like top 20 in my metrics by the end of the season. That was really the weak point of the team through about mid-October. Then they came on. You look at this schedule right here. From SMU to Notre Dame, you've got sneaky good defense. You've got brutal defense. You've got good defensive coordinator. You've got defensive talent here, which who knows what happens on Saturdays. Could be anything from world beaters to beaten by the world. We'll skip North Carolina. And then at Notre Dame, who I think is going to be exceptional and I really like on defense. That is a very tough stretch for a guy with this resume to face. I love Mike Norvell, but I think we might be testing the limits of just what he can do. Season win total is 9.5. ACC champs are plus 290. I'll say it for the 5th time. I love Mike Norvell. I think this is a rebuild season, and I do not like DJU with that stretch I outlined. I'm not going to play under, but I'm definitely fading them as ACC champs and treating that as dead money in the pool. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, this is. I think in the coming years of college football, we're going to see a lot more of this. The quote unquote competitive rebuild, right? We see this a lot in NFL teams where they're like, "Oh, this is a rebuilding year for us," but it's a quote unquote competitive rebuild, right? And now that means different things for the NFL. That means for college, right? NFL, okay, competitive rebuild, but without outright tanking, you could be 2 to 3 years away from becoming truly competitive, right? College football, you get a couple kids committing to you in basically, and again, those commitments are just a couple months into the season at this point, right? You could by October you could already know the next year's going to be a lot better, right? And then plus with the portals, right? I think you're going to see this a lot, and Florida State's going to go through this year. Michigan is going to go through this. Obviously, I haven't talked about Michigan yet, but we're going to see teams that when they get really good, and you're going to see some of them holding on to some of these kind of like fringe NFL draft players. They kick around for a couple of years, then they have these peak seasons, and then they all go, right? And I think that's exactly what we're seeing with Florida State this year. I'm a little more pro DJU than I think you are. The thing is with the 30 Apex versus Washington and Oregon, yeah, not good. I'm not gonna sit here and say that's good, but at a certain point, you were on Oregon State, right? A team that was hopelessly outclassed by those teams, right? The question is, was that you not being a good quarterback, or you saying, okay, I know we're in deep trouble here. There's no way our defense could possibly stop them. I have to try to take even bigger risks and bigger risks to try to do, and you get interceptions, incomplete passes, right? There's questions about that, right? I obviously think having a much better supporting cast around him, that Apex against the strong teams will improve. But on top of that, though, not a lot here that's particularly terrifying. Okay, yeah, SMU, yep, Clemson, always competitive game with Clemson, but a winnable game. They are competitive slash winnable in most of these games here, I would say. They're not, this isn't, oh, okay, 4-win season or something. They could be a really good team. I don't know, and with some of these teams, we don't know exactly what we're going to get. I think this team is good at ACC champs at 290. I do not like that at all. I'm not touching it, but they could surprise us a little bit. If you told me that the ACC championship game had Florida State in it, I wouldn't be like, oh no, I'm surprised. I'd be like, I could see it.
I could see it too. And before I throw it to Josh, I'm just going to do my dick maneuver here. So you said, okay, Oregon State might be outclassed. I'm just going to make it here. So Robert liked DJU at quarterback at Clemson, right? Is that what we're?
There are degrees. There's degrees to this. There's degrees to this.
Very fair. All right, Josh, what do you think about Florida State?
Yeah, I do think I'm totally in agreement with you. I think Mike Norvell is a genius as a coach, and I think will be his toughest act yet. DJ, it's not like with Jordan Travis where you had maybe a guy that was not a very good passer, but at least he could run, he could make plays, you could scheme around him very well, and you had two NFL wide receivers you're throwing to. Now you're putting DJU in there. Taking away two NFL wide receivers, and you're replacing them with hopefully a guy in Malik Benson that it can be decent. But other than that, like, you don't have anything in that wide receiver room that is proven. You have Hakeem Williams, who right now he's looking more like a bust than he is a hit as a high 4-star there at FSU. And then behind that, there's not a lot. So you're talking about Norvell either having to lean on the run game or scheme up something, which of course he can scheme, but I think to what you said, like, this schedule is not very forgiving. And then at SMU, like at Miami, at Notre Dame, those are 3 tough road games. And then you got Memphis out of conference, which I'm not saying Memphis is like going to be crazy good, but for a G5, non-Power 4 school, like, they're one of the better ones, and they have a lot of returning talent on that offense. And I bet you they're going to want to beat their old coach and Mike Norvell too. There'd be a little motivation there. I don't think I'm with you guys. The ACC champs, there's no way that I would bet on that. And the over-under is probably a little bit closer. I think it's really going to come down to their defense, and does it Marvin Jones Jr. coming over from Michigan and Earl Little Jr. coming over from Alabama, 2 former 5-stars. Can they realize their potential? Because that could, if their defense can be elite again, then that could potentially hide some of the problems on offense. Because you guys hit it. Like, this conference isn't very good overall.
Yeah, maybe that's a stretch to look at unders from that SMU to Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
Curious if my model will spit that out. All right, SMU, 3rd season under Rhett Lashley, 18-9 so far in his career. They won the American last season. Preston Stone, actually, you were the guy who tipped this off to him. To me, he was just a name and Phil Steele, and you said, no, watch out for this guy. This is the reason that Tanner Mordecai is going to freeze his butt off in November in Madison. Top apex for all the returning starters in this conference. Here's where I get a little concerned, and this is when I dug in. If I'm going to throw it at DJU, I got to say it here. Preston Stone versus TCU in Oklahoma, 58 Apex. All the other games, 165. That's a big difference. That's basically Cole Snyder and Caleb Williams right there. We'll come back to that. That sticks with me. Defense. How do I say this? We've got 4 defenses in this year that are green in all. Oops. Yeah, that were green in all 4 of these metrics, in defensive apex, in basically run defense, passing yards allowed, and power. They were one of the 4. They're in a group with Penn State, Iowa, Michigan, and Nebraska. That's elite. Now, again, they did it against American Conference play, but if you're going to move up, it's good that you basically just absolutely skunk your opponents to that way. This is what's interesting to me. I've got a good defense here that returns enough in terms of returning starters. Who are the 3 best quarterbacks that they're going to face on this schedule? I think that they could just surprisingly not Rhett Lashley brand. I could see this as like defensively curb stomping their way to a lot of wins here. They have 3 road games here, but there's a bye between Louisville and Stanford, so that's not so troubling. I like this over. Now, I guess a lot of people do since it's taking money at minus 125. And I like them for ACC champs at 1,600. I see real value there. And even I talked to some smarter people, like to the degree they're smart people at my gym. This surprises them. But we're going to get through, as we said, every team has a question mark. Their question mark to me is I didn't expect this when I was starting to break them down. This is my question mark about them is he stunk against TCU and Oklahoma. Josh, you were nodding in agreement like you actually saw those games and maybe you might have lost $1 or $2 on them. What do you think about SMU?
Yeah, I think they're a team, and this is typical of a Rhett Lashley offense, that if they're more talented than the team they're playing, like they're probably going to win and they're probably going to score points. The scheme's not overly complicated. And so when you have the athletes to out-athlete the opponent, then it works really well. But when you go up against a team that has better athletes than you, then I think overall that offense struggles, and therefore Preston Stone struggles because it's not an overly complex system. There's 1 or 2 reads, and that's about it. And then you run 1 or 2 running plays as well. And so they just try to mix it up with different formations and stuff like that. But to your point, who do they play on this schedule? There's not a lot of good quarterbacks that you're going to face. Yeah. And even defensively, Florida State, like, yeah, they'll probably lose that game. Like maybe Louisville, depending on how good they are defensively this year. They're pretty good last year. All they need to do to get to the ACC championship game is like surprise a Florida State or, beat a Louisville. And I could see them totally walking away with 1 loss on this schedule. You know what I'm saying? As far as conference loss, which puts you in the ACC championship game. I almost feel more comfortable with the ACC champ prediction than even the over-under.
The season wins, yeah.
Yep.
There's more value there, right?
I
mean, yeah. Now, Robert, did I hear when we were talking about the quarterbacks that they have to face? Did you say Tony Muskett at Virginia, or was I hearing things there?
No, the thing is, this is actually looking at this schedule, Nevada, oh no, right? BYU, TCU, these are not particularly scary teams to have to face off against, right? Florida State, Louisville, but it's then Stanford, which is recovering, but definitely not there yet. Duke, a team that's completely rebuilding. Pitt, a team that's been rebuilding for the last 2 years now. Boston College, another team that I guess is rebuilding, we'll call it that. Virginia, another team is rebuilding, and Cal, they clear out the back end of the schedule. They're going to be better than basically every other team on the schedule with the exception of I'm not sure the exact line. Probably dogs to Florida State and maybe dogs. They're at Louisville, so maybe short dogs to Louisville. But outside of that, this team has a really good chance of almost going undefeated in the conference or maybe even going undefeated in the conference, right? If Florida State isn't having a great year, they could lose that game. And then all of a sudden we're talking about an undefeated SMU, right? I really like the improvement on defense. That's a huge thing, right? Especially when you're going from the G5 level up. The offenses you're facing off against are better. That's something you have to deal with. On offense, they also improved as well. That's also huge. Preston Stone, this is his second year. He had a really good Apex last year. Maybe that could improve. So I'm pretty high on this team, right? I think in a conference where there's not a lot of teams to be high on, I think this is one of the teams, especially with a 16-1 ticket. I'd love to see that at a 16-1 ticket, yeah.
Yeah, one more thing too. I got to say, as much as I love football and I can't wait for it to start, that game at Nevada is going to be so uncompetitive. They actually have a barbecue that I'm going to, and I'm not even like worried about it because that's not going to be fun to watch. I think only if you like literally like are a SMU student. Maybe even the alums will be bored by that one. That's I don't know. A couple of real gimmies to open the season there.
Yeah, one little
Please.
trick real quick on this schedule is like going to Stanford, right, on in week 8 and then coming back week 9 against Duke. Like you're just playing on two different. That's just a weird scheduling quirk to me to have to go from one coast to the other coast when you're in the central time zone. But just a weird random thing that I was like observing on that schedule. But it shouldn't be a problem because it's a bye week right before Stanford, so you're not going to be dealing with any kind of travel lag.
That does
But
stink.
Just funny.
All right. So this is Einstein's theory about bending light. Any idea why I am bringing this up and we're talking about Miami?
It's because they shouldn't do what they do.
It's literally because our guy Mario, he makes light bend when it comes to metrics and one loss. I'm just going to write the second bullet point here. They had an 8.9 power rating last season. That was more than 12 of their 13 opponents, and somehow our guy managed to go 7-6. I don't know how he does it. I don't want to make this the Mario pod because it just we can't. You actually last season gave us the heads up that Cam Ward was very new to the quarterback position when he was an incarnate word.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still jury out on him. I don't know what he is. His numbers at Incarnate Word they're okay, but they weren't like world class. He had an apex of about 105, I think, which is weird considering that offense seems a little more high powered as we've seen like at Texas State now. So his first year at Washington State, he had an apex of 78, and part of that was just adjusting to the college game, and he had a different offensive coordinator. I don't know if here last season under Arbuckle, like he got it, or if he just meshed with Arbuckle. I'm just a bit concerned. I just don't know if he's got it yet. And, I've got this magic and I've got this question mark. If I'm going back to the John Cooper thing, that's the question about this team. I've got two questions where it's if I look back, it's Cam Ward had one good season if it doesn't work out. And if it does, it's, oh, shoot, I didn't bet on Miami. It can go either way. They had a good Ryan last season, or they have a good returning Ryan. I guess they have two top 50 receivers. One is Restrepo. Don't remember the name of the other one. I can just say just good luck and load up on the Tums if you're going to play either side of the, especially the over. I put the under because you actually can get plus money, which would just be a little more fun bet. Sorry, Josh. 400 seems short with the questions I have here to win the ACC. He's recruiting like a beast, and that's never been in question. It's just quarterback and the 3 hours where Mario's doing on the sidelines. It's a question for me. This is so unbettable, but it's just juicy material. It's a tasty steak that will give us flavor for the whole season. But I can't play anything on this before the season. What about you, Josh?
You hit the nail on the head, right? If you're just looking at this on paper, you're going, 10-win team. You should probably bet the over on this. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. Mario Cristobal could have a Georgia Tech game where he just doesn't kneel the ball. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, like, talent-wise, like, this is the most talented Miami team. They even got in years, probably 15, 20 years. And they even got, like, Sam Brown from Houston came in. He's another 800-yard receiver. So they have 3 returning 800-yard receivers, which is incredible. 2 of the top 3 in the ACC, top returning wide receivers according to yards. And so it's like, and Cam Ward coming in, who was great when his team was better than the other teams he played, and he seemed to really struggle when they were the underdogs. And so you would think that this would set up for them to do, but you got the Mario factor. And so it's just unpredictable. Like anything with Miami at this point, it's like, again, you nailed on the head. Would you be surprised if they win the ACC and go to the playoffs? Probably not, talent-wise, but you would also not be surprised if they go 7-5 or 7-6 again. So it makes it unbettable. I think that's just where I am with this team. It's like, all right, Mario, you're going to have to prove it to us that you're back to the Oregon level of ability. I will say at least he's got Damian Martinez and he's got Mark Fletcher there in the
Yeah.
backfield that they could ultimately just lean on that run game, which he used to do at Oregon when they beat Ohio State, when they were going to the Rose Bowl and things like that. There's a lot of outs for them. They use a poker term, and so that's helpful on offense, and their defensive coordinator is really good in Lance Guidry. But again, you have Mario Cristobal that's calling the shots. So who knows?
Yeah. The other thing, too, before I throw it to Robert, is this schedule's a lot more on the generous side, like SMU's, than it is the tough one for Florida State as well, which is in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And it might make it for that much more of a heart-wrenching loss when they do something just out of the ordinary.
I mean, that's what you say. If they beat Florida week 1, then there's only Virginia Tech and Florida State on the schedule, both of them at home, that are really gonna, and Louisville. There's 2 home games, and you're going to be more talented than most of your opponents, so you should win, but that's where they play the game.
Yeah, if you include Louisville in there, there's not even the crafty coach who doesn't have the talent but can really coach his team up. There's none of those kind of coaches. Maybe, but just there's such a talent differential that he just can't. Yeah. Robert, do you see any kind of bettable angle on the Hurricanes, or are you with us of just sit back, watch, and enjoy?
No, 100%. I think you definitely can't play ACC championship on this. 4-1, no way. That if it was 16-1, SMU 100%, yeah, but at 4-1, no. I want an under 9 just for fun, just because we're all sick here. But that seems to be just a fun bet to watch for the season, just to be like, I wonder how this is going to cash. I think there are a couple outs for that 9. I mean, you have Florida. This game week 0 or week 1, whatever you want to call it. I think this is the loser gets fired bowl. That's right there, week 1. You're at Florida. I like Florida in that game. You have South Florida, again, not the best team, but a team that was definitely made improvements last year. That's a team you don't want to have to go into their stadium to play. Virginia Tech, I don't know about them yet. We're going to talk about them later. At Louisville and then Florida State. Georgia Tech is going to be a weirdly sneaky team. And then Syracuse is whatever, right? I feel like yes, their schedule looks a lot more like SMU's than say, Florida State's does. But there are places where they could trip up. I could see, okay, Kyle McCord was actually good for 2 games, and one of them was against Miami. Or, TJU just ripped them. They threw for 400 yards against Miami. I could see, Georgia Tech, they had their one good game again, and they were 20-point dogs. And I could see there are paths here that I could see for Miami to get under 9, and I could see paths for them to lose some of these games. So it's... I want to see how this works. The thing is, again, and this is the thing, right? They're 12-3 in the 3 years under Mario Cristobal. That should not be happening at all. Just straight up, that should not happen. That should not be their record. They should be a lot better. And again, 8.9 power rating, more than 12 of their opponents. They went 7-6. Again, these are things that should not be happening. This team should have 4 or 5 losses over the last 3 years, period. That's it. They have almost triple that. Right? So this is the thing. This team was already pretty good when Mario came in. You can't say, this team was already pretty good. And they've blown a lot of games that they should have won and lost against teams they had no business losing to. I 100% need to see this team do the thing before I actually get behind this team. So until then, put me down for a small under 9 just for fun. And I just want to see the fireworks of how... If I'm wrong, whatever, but if I'm right, it's going to be really funny.
Yeah. Interesting, Manny Diaz coming back to Miami, too, towards the end of the season. Not that he'll really have the guns there, but I don't know. That'll be interesting to just see, pregame handshake and all that stupid stuff. All right. I'm wondering what the heck here with Louisville. Jeff Brom, obviously a good coach. Nice improvement in the offense from year 1, offensive rating from there's a 3.8, to a 4.9. Very experienced offensive line. They're going to have the most starts, assuming everybody still stays healthy. 3rd most starts outside of their learning curve in all of FBS, and they have the 9th most career starts of any offensive line in FBS, which for an offensive guy like Brom is just great. I'm curious what you guys think about this. This is wildly subject to interpretation. Tyler Shuck was very good his freshman year at Oregon. He struggled in some spots, and so they thought they could do better. He goes to Texas Tech. He has another great season statistically. Last 2 seasons, he's struggled. I'm sure he was hurt. I'm also just wondering if it wasn't a fit with the Joey McGuire experiment, or just the Joey McGuire experiment doesn't fit him or isn't working. I just don't know. They lose Jamari Thrash, but they pick up Colin Lacey, another awesome addition from the Sun Belt to a very good passing head coach. A little surprised about the under here, under 8. I think a lot of this comes down to, how do you interpret the Tyler Shuck story? If people have just bailed on him and said, yeah, last 2 years he stunk, he doesn't have anything to offer, I can see that not working out. If Jeff Brom can get anywhere near this team could be like sneakily like really good. I want to go back to Jack Plummer, not Jake. Jake was the guy at ASU. Jack Plummer merely had familiarity with Brom. Jack Plummer didn't have an awesome Purdue career under Brom. He just knew what to do, and he turned it around, man. If you look at last season, this team had a team apex of 125 with Jack Plummer. Jack Plummer had not shown anything. Tyler Shuck has shown some stuff too. I've got really mixed signals here. This looks a little short for 8, and especially with the undertaking action here. I don't think they're going to win the ACC champs, but this number implies that they're not without a chance. The over and under 8 just seems short to me, and the under is taking money here. I guess the market is just discounting any kind of Shuck revival. I want to take the over here. What do you think, Robert?
I do the over it, and it is good to call out that over under 8, 650 to win the conference, right? Those lines are incompatible with each other, right? I think what they're trying, and especially the under shaded, I feel like what they're saying is this team is probably not good, but at the same time they could win this thing, right? Which is insane thing to say. You're like, this is probably not good, but they could win this, right? It very diametrically opposed. I'm really skeptical about Tyler Shuck. He was good in Oregon, but that was the 2020 year. That was the COVID shortened year. A lot of weird stuff happened that year. I think that was with Mario Cristobal, right? Yes, that was Mario Cristobal there in the COVID shortened year. How much of that was him? How much of that was Mario Cristobal? It's unclear, right? It is concerning to see the Apex go down year over year, but he has been injured. He's played very little basically since leaving Oregon. I think he played something in 2021, but has missed a lot since then. That's really concerning, but at the same time, you're now behind a team that's a lot better on the offensive line. Being good is really good. That definitely should protect him from injury, right? I don't hate something on this. I think this is going to be a team you find your spots. Miami is going to be a spot. At Clemson could be a spot. At Notre Dame could be a spot. They upset them last year as well. There's going to be spots to play this team, and I think I like an over, but at the same time, I think this is the ACC champs. If it was like 10 or so to 1, I'd be like maybe, but I think honestly where it is right now, I think that's pretty good value where it is right now. I don't want to touch that. I like the over, and then maybe some spot plays through the year, and that's about it.
Like the inverse of SMU, where the season total is a little more attractive than the ACC champs. Are you buying my Tyler Shuck revival scenario, Josh?
Oh, if he can stay healthy, absolutely. I think Tyler Shuck is a talented quarterback, and it's never been the issue. It's been injuries. Every year, he just seems to get injured, have a couple good games, and then he falls off. And I think, oh man, we've seen Jeff Brom do more with less than Tyler Shuck, right? And especially like these guys like Aiden O'Connell, right, who are older quarterbacks, seem to really thrive under Brom, right? It takes a little bit of headiness to get his scheme, but once you get it, you got it. And Tyler Shuck, the biggest thing is just, it's good that the offensive line is experienced, and hopefully he doesn't run a ton. Because if he runs, that's when he usually gets hurt. And so if I knew that Tyler Shuck was going to be healthy the entire year, I would totally go over on this season total. It's just, if he's hurt, then the backup is, I think it's a redshirt freshman, essentially. And then it's like all bets are off. It's the opposite of what our boy Brom thrives with. But in the other thing with Jamar, they have Colin Lacey coming in, but they also have Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama coming in, who hasn't done a lot to this stage of his career, but again, Charlie Jones didn't do a lot before he came in and hooked up with Jeff Brom either. So this
He had
guy,
an amazing Iowa offense, believe it or not.
yeah, I just see Chris Bell, Ja'Cory Brooks, Colin Lacey. They got 3 or 4 running backs. One of those guys should be able to pop. There's some good talent. Combine that with the offensive line, and I think this offense is going to be good, and the defense returns like 79% of their production. And they were a good defense last year. So
Yeah, they were.
You know, I think this team's got some like sneaky upside with the schedule. It's just, yeah, because other than Notre Dame, Clemson, and Miami, I look down. Of course, there can be pitfalls, but I don't see them losing one other game or more than one other game on this schedule. So it feels like 8 could be their floor with a healthy Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, and I see if a number like 8 means unless Shuck gets hurt, that 5th loss, I guess you would say, to get him to 7 is hard to see coming. Yep. And Colin Lacey, the Sun Belt was for real last year. That was I had that as the best G5 conference, and he was like in the top 8 to 15 all season once we started tracking player Ryan. So yeah, I'm gonna give some thought, especially that's gonna be plus money on the over. I'm gonna give some thought to that and run the numbers on it. Oh man, guess who's back in our life? Max Johnson.
Can never get rid of him.
Replaces Drake May. I think, Max Johnson was literally perfectly average last season, an apex of 100. The other guy at Texas A&M, Wegman, had an apex of 123. Petrino actually sneakily did some good stuff at A&M. Just Max Johnson was not a part of that. Don't know how. Is this Chip Lindsey? Is that the coordinator?
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Don't know how much of an upgrade that is for Mr. Johnson. Offensive line pretty much got cleaned out due to graduation or transfers or whatever. They were pretty much elite in Ryan last season. They didn't have a top 100 receiver in Ryan, though, which is interesting. I guess they just spread it out a lot. I don't know. You'd probably know better than me. Oh, yeah, here, Chip Lindsey. Interestingly, as I said was going to happen, with Phil Longo gone, the defense improved a lot. And we saw the other side of that at Wisconsin. Wisconsin didn't really look like a Luke Fickell defense last season. Jeff Collins, the new DC. Don't like him as a head coach. I think he's a pretty good defensive coordinator, so that could be a good sign. I've got a lot of mixed signals here. The 7.5 seems fair. I have no interest in backing a Max Johnson team at all on over at any point. Don't know if under's the play here either. Their defense actually might show some semblance of like capability this year. So this is just a sit and watch here for me. I don't even see a tricky game in that first half of the season where it's watch out for this or watch out for that. We know the plot line here for the first 6 weeks. I guess maybe if James Madison, they're going to take a little bit of a step back with Cignetti leaving. So I just don't see any big plot lines here. Just a pass for me. Do you have any more stronger feelings about this one, Robert?
Yeah, I've been calling for Mac Brown's job here a little bit. I've not been the biggest fan of him. I feel like they have definitely underperformed expectations. At one point early last year, I think, probably this time last year, Drake May, one of the favorites for the Heisman. That didn't happen, right? Definitely saddled by a lot of losses there. A lot of close games that shouldn't have been close, right? Okay, you got a new DC, great, that's fine. But now the offense is going to suffer, right? Offensive line cleaned out. You're throwing in Max Johnson, which doesn't sound like a great plan. You got a lot of receiving yards, that's great, but who's throwing it to you, right? And how are they throwing it to you based off of what protection on the offensive line, right? Defense, they needed a lot of help. They were already really bad. They needed more help. We'll see how that goes. I think there's been a noticeable lack of any sort of enthusiasm for this team, and you see it, right? 7.5, it's a perfectly mediocre season, 31 ACC champs, right? There is not a lot of love for this team, and I understand it, right? And I don't know. This is going to be a rough year for them, I think. Again, they're going to be favored in quite a lot of these games. Obviously, Minnesota, that's basically a pick week 1, which is not a great sign. Minnesota is definitely not a top Big Ten team. Then you've got James Madison. They did lose their coach, so that's not great for them. You should be favored there. Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech can always do weird things. Virginia, that'll be like one of those like Tim Muskett games. Then there's Florida State. And then there's Wake Forest, does weird things at times. Boston College, and then you got NC State, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of kind of easy wins on this, but if you lose to Minnesota, then all of a sudden it starts questioning, like, okay, are you sure you're going to be able to beat Georgia Tech? Are you sure you're going to be able to beat Virginia? This is
Yeah.
the thing. I think it's very interesting that, I don't know, I just think this line is very weird, and I don't know how much longer Mac Brown is going to be the coach of this team, to be fair, because they just, no matter what the expectations are, they always seem to underperform that expectation.
Yeah, and you're closer to the players than I am, Josh. So I'm just you seem closer to recruiting. I'm not at all. I thought Mac Brown was recruiting well. So how does he wind up with Max Johnson as his quarterback? Did he have like guys leave the program, or just things didn't work out?
Yeah, they got a guy. I think it was hard for them to recruit with Drake May at quarterback because nobody wants to come in and sit behind him. They got a guy named Connor Harrell who's like a mid 3-star who show some promise last year, but he struggled in the bowl game. They gave him the chance to prove himself, and it wasn't pretty. And so they went in the portal and got Max Johnson. Yeah, I think this team is just, yeah, the transfer portal like hasn't been great for them, right? Like they haven't gone out and gotten like elite talent, at least not this last year. So maybe that's a sign that people are down on Mac Brown, that he's not able to. He is a car salesman. That's what he does. Is he should be able to recruit. And if you're not recruiting at a high level, then what are you doing if you're Mac Brown, especially when you're hiring Chip Lindsey as your OC? And he's ruining. Like you have one shot with Drake May to win this, and you chose Chip Lindsey, who absolutely, you look at the metrics and they just all went down on Drake May, and that's again direct correlation to Chip Lindsey. Now Marion Hampton, like he did a lot better last year with Chip Lindsey as the OC, but now that you don't have the offensive line and you lose Tez Walker, your NFL wide receiver, this is, to me, I'm with you. This is unbettable because it's how do you predict what this team's going to do? Because they look so bad. To me, on paper, they look so bad offensively, potentially, that it's just impossible to figure out. And in defense, you're relying on a new DC to come in and really improve them overall. So I'm staying away from this, even though the schedule is not even that hard. Like this should be a schedule that we're like, oh yeah, 7.5, they can get to 8. But they have too many question marks for me to bet on them.
Yeah, I appreciate that context because I think I just got a little recent brand burned into my brain. I look at their schedule and I think it's easy. I think I need to throw them in the category of easy opponent at the same time too, based on just, as I like to say, most conferences have some kind of traffic jam, and I think they're like in the traffic jam near the lower part of this conference too. Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule, and there's one game I see on here that could be just fascinating, and it'd be totally on brand for us, but we'll bring that up later. This team, I really don't know. This is, I know how I feel. I just don't know if it's better. I don't know. I'm already flummoxed by the mixed signals here, and I haven't even said one thing. How about the first thing? Cade Klubnik stinks, okay? He missed the bum list by 3 spots at the end of last season. He appeared on there a couple times. Let's not forget, Dabo was a receivers coach, okay? The offense was his side of the ball. Look where they've ranked the last 3 seasons from offensive power standpoint. Minus 3.8, plus 1.4, and minus 2.6. That stinks. That's embarrassing. And remember, this is the Clemson offense. We had that stupid quote, I think it was after our preview, where Dabo said, oh, Riley's here to run the Clemson offense. I'm pretty sure that didn't come up in the interview. I'm just guessing. He's got to be so pissed right now that he's running this crap show. Only Syracuse had a lower Ryan last season among all the ACC teams. What a disaster. Good running game last season. I believe they had Will Shipley.
Yep.
But
he's in the NFL
gone
now.
Yeah, so I don't see any kind of identity here. They're notorious for offensively not developing offensive linemen. That seems to be the brand. I want to say they're not tough, but offensively, I don't know what they are. They were the top defense in the ACC last season, 6th in FBS. Probably keep enough pieces where they should be good. I think this season's is where I'm gonna be sold or not sold on Wes Goodwin. I think there was a lot of Venables DNA in the defense the last 2 seasons, so this will be informative on that. I think just that number got set too high at 9.5, and the market just swallowed that up. This offense is no bueno, man. And that ACC champs number at 350 is just a joke. To me, that is the deadest of dead money that can be in a pool. This is like the John Cooper thing. You've got an offense that is just like, how can you back this offense? And you've got some questions about the defense in year 3 of Goodwin. Again, he's been good so far, but less Venables in the program. I can't lay 160 on the under 9.5, although I'm tempted. I can't see him beating Georgia. I think, boy, they could lose to NC State. They could definitely lose to Florida State. They could lose to Louisville. They could lose to Virginia Tech. I could definitely see weird, goofy Pat Narduzzi beating these guys and then losing a horrible game. And they could lose to up and down South Carolina. Seems like the market's onto that. So the only way that there's a play here is just considering this a bad low odds third choice in the ACC and just look to play the champs elsewhere. That's the only way I see it here. Good luck if you want to play the over. You're getting plus money at least. Are you going to take the over, Robert?
No, that is not happening. So the thing is, again, last year we all actually picked Clemson to make the ACC championship game, and there's a couple of reasons for that. They were actually they won the ACC the year before, and okay, yeah, maybe they didn't necessarily improve a lot, but we're like, oh, DJU is gone now, maybe they'll improve a little bit. Their defense is keeping them in games. If their offense just gets a little better, they'll be fine. That didn't happen. Their offense regressed. Cade Klubnik turned out to be a massive bust, and they're still having problems in getting new blood in with the transfer portal. They still have not used the transfer portal, literally, plus no Ryan. And so basically, when I thought this, I was like, oh man, Clemson's odds to win the ACC, they're going to be like 4th or 5th. And I was very surprised when I opened up my sports book and saw that they were the co-favorites to win the ACC with Florida State. I was like, what? Am I reading this wrong? They're top. Why? Like, how could a team not be close to competing for an ACC championship, get worse, but then be co-favorites to win the said ACC championship? Makes no sense to me. I'm like, I don't understand how that math works at all. To be fair, I actually do know why. It's because a lot of Clemson people are like, oh, Clemson will be better this year, right? They're throwing money into Clemson, right? So that plus 350 is a gift to the sports books, basically. But like, that's the thing, right? That's why. It's a bunch of people throwing dumb money at Clemson. The sports books don't believe that Clemson is plus 350. They don't believe that. But they know there's a lot of people that are going to rush to the sports book to bet Clemson at whatever number they throw up there. So they throw up a number like 350, right? This is the thing. That number is insane to me. That Clemson should be nowhere near the top of this conference. I think it's probably only a matter of time before Dabo joins Nick Saban there on a couch somewhere. Yeah, I think that's where this is heading.
Wow. Dabo's a lot younger. I know about that. Maybe he gets reincarnated at North Carolina. I don't know. Bright signs for you for Clemson, Josh. You seem to be nodding a lot when I was killing this team here.
Yeah. So I'll give you the upside on this team. And just a little devil's advocate. So the big thing you have to overcome is Cade Klubnik, and a bad quarterback is a hard thing to overcome. So we'll just lay that where it is. But Phil Moffa's coming back, who split carries last year with Will Shipley. And quite frankly, he was a better running back than Will Shipley last year. When Will Shipley was out, like the dude went off against Notre Dame and then came back. I think it was against North Carolina, maybe the next game, and did really well again. And so Phil Moffa, if this team is able to rely on him and go, hey, we're going to give this kid 20 to 25 touches a game and just ride him this year, then I can see them winning more games than they probably should. I'll also say Antonio Williams got hurt last year. Tyler Brown, who is another true freshman inside wide receiver, played, but then he got hurt a little bit too. And they have just struggled. One of the things with DJU and Cade Klubnik is that they have not had a good outside wide receiver at Clemson in 4 years, basically since T. Higgins. And so some of this for me is like, how bad are these players and just how bad is the talent they're throwing to? And they have 2 freshmen coming in that are elite. One is a 5-star talent in TJ Moore. He's 6'3", 210. He was the Army All-American MVP for that game, and he was right there with his kid Jeremiah Smith. That's an elite wide receiver coming in. And then it got another kid named Bryant Wesco who came in and lit up camp in the spring, and he's a high 4-star. So they finally have 2 guys at outside wide receiver that could be good. It's just how quickly can they do it. And the other side of this is that this schedule is absolutely brutal. I mean, they could lose 3 games by Florida State I could totally see them losing Georgia. NC State to me is like one of my favorites in this conference this year. Like I really like their talent coming in. And then Florida State, that's just a toss-up to me, and it's at Florida State, so Florida State's probably favored. So I could see them losing 3 of those games. And App State, to me, is not going to be a pushover for them as a team that is going to have a lot of returning talent on that offense. That's just the first 5 games of the year. Then they got to get through the rest of the schedule. I just don't like the schedule, which is part of why I'm just like, man, I'm staying away from this one for sure.
Yeah, interesting point about the running game. We'll see how that plays out. I really like the point about just you don't really see them if they're, and ironically, if there's one thing that's easy about a Lincoln Riley offense is that you have guys that are like 10 yards open downfield.
Yeah.
And you have the exact opposite for Clemson. It's like thread it right here, and that's it. And I'm wondering, would Caleb Williams just look like just an ordinary guy that can just has good legs in this offense? It might be. Really good point. Okay, none of us are biting on the Clemson.
One thing I want to talk about is just because you said about the Georgia game week 1. I've already bet Georgia there. I think 13.5 is nowhere near enough. This Georgia team is definitely out for blood this year after losing the SEC championship game and then just for many reasons, but they're just like, yeah, you're a bad team now, so we're just going to send you to go kill Florida State now. But no, they're going to be out for blood. They're going to absolutely destroy Clemson. That's not even going to be a competitive game. I don't know why people are like, oh, it's going to be a great game. You're like, yeah, let's see Georgia destroy a team by 40 points. It's a great game. I don't understand why that's going to be on national TV, but whatever.
Well, you just hope that Cade Klubnik doesn't walk away from this game just like getting shattered with his confidence, right? That's what happened to DJU.
Yeah.
He got crushed in that first game, and he hasn't recovered 3 years later.
Yep.
I understand why Georgia wants to play Clemson. I don't understand why Clemson wants to play Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, they scheduled it probably a long time ago, I'm sure, and things were looking a little bit different.
That's a generous characterization. All right. I like this team. Again, where you've got a bunch of John Cooper questions, why not these guys? Brent Pryde's been a slow build. He actually said it was going to be a slow build when he took the job. Kyron Jones won 109 Apex in his first year starting. Guess what? That's 45 points better than Cade Klubnik and doesn't have quite the talent around him there. Backup quarterback, sneakily, I like this. Colin Schley, the backup. It's not like you're in a Louisville situation where it's, wait, our backups who? I like that. They lose very little in receiving from last season. Not that they were awesome. I see the pieces here. Plus they pick up our guy, or they get back our guy, Ollie Jennings. I didn't know this. He was injured in I think the second game of last season. He was 12th in all of FBS Ryan in the year before. We were expecting great things from him. I think in that first game, you would probably know this better than me. They had that guy that just loved to throw interceptions. Is it Grant Wells? Was he still?
Yes. Yes, yeah. He was the starting quarterback.
So Mr. Jennings, I think, is in for a real treat this year compared to last year.
Yeah.
I love this, and this just speaks to the slow build. You've got this above average in all of the experience and improvement metrics. Only 2 in all of FBS are like that. They're one of them. I was hoping to see more improvement from the defense and Pryde, a defensive coordinator. They're experienced. This is actually weirdly like my question mark, which is a little unsettling since the head coach is a defensive guy. I'm not alone. The over's taking money here on over 8. The 12 is just enough for me to bite on a little bit. I like SMU better, but I can seriously see the path here. I like it. They missed Florida State, correct? If I look here at the conference games, I could see by the closing line, I could see them being favored in all but one. If they're as good as I think by the time they pick Clemson, I could see them at home. I could see them being favored in that game. The word's out here. Maybe that might be short. It might not looking short depending on your context, but I like the path here. 12-1 with as good of a case as teams that are like at 4-1 or whatever. I'll throw some on the Hokies, and you're nodding a lot, Josh. You agree with me?
Yeah, totally. I think this is one of the best over even bets on this one. Name the 4 losses on the schedule. I dare you to find 5. You're at least breaking even, if not winning this. I think they're the top. According to Bill Connolly, they're the top returning production on offense this year at 95% of their offensive production returning. Yeah. And that's not including their number 1 wide receiver who's coming back, Ollie Jennings, right?
Yeah.
And then the defense, right? They're returning, I think, 77% of their production on defense. So the real question to me for them is their run defense. That's where they were weak last year. I don't see that I know they brought in some transfers. on the defensive line, but they seem to be more playing to their strength as pass rushers. And that's what their strength is as a defense is getting after the quarterback, getting pressures. So as long as they don't run into some like buzzsaws, which again on the schedule, it's like you got Clemson, you got Miami, you got Rutgers that are gonna have good running backs, but other than that, like all of these teams, they should be able to. They're not going to threaten them on the ground, and so therefore they should be able to shut them down. I like betting on them as ACC champs too because it's a good number, and I could totally see them having only 1 or 2 losses in conference. Especially, again, we just talked about Cade Klubnik gets broke week 1, he's gone, and mentally, and then Clemson's just not scaring you whatsoever after that. So, yeah, I like Virginia Tech a lot. They're one of my definitely sleepers in this conference for sure.
Okay, yeah. Robert, are you on the train with this one here?
I think I'm going to break from opinion here on
Wow.
Virginia Tech. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of positive things about Virginia Tech. And to be fair, on paper, lots of positive numbers here, right? Kyron Jones, first season, 109 Apex. That's not bad. Definitely room for improvement there, especially with an improving offensive line. Keeps a lot of the weapons from last year. Defense got a little bit better. I understand the kind of steam towards this. Obviously, third year under Brett Pry, 10-14. Record not as great as you'd want to see it. You'd obviously want that number to be a bit higher over the last 3 years, but again, slow rebuild. Virginia Tech a little harder to build at than some of the other schools. That being said, I think I find myself saying some of the same things I said about Virginia Tech that I said about Florida State last year, which has me a little concerned. Because looking back at the Virginia Tech schedule, okay, they went 7-6 last year. I think that included the bowl game win. They beat Tulane in the Military Bowl. So like they beat Old Dominion. Okay, they beat Pittsburgh. That's expected. They beat Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College, and then Virginia, right? But then look at the losses, right? They got blown out by Florida State, got blown out by Louisville. They lost pretty badly to NC State as favorites at home. They lost to Purdue as a 1-point favorite. They got blown out by Rutgers. They lost to Marshall pretty badly as they were actually underdogs, but then they lost that as well. But with knowing what happened with Marshall, that should have been closer, right? I see a lot of games last year that they probably should have won, but again, they haven't proved, right? I find myself because I said this about last year about Florida State. I'm like, oh, there's games on here that they should have won, right? Last year I said Florida State they should have beaten Wake Forest. They came close to beating NC State, but they probably should have won, and they should have probably beaten Clemson the year before, right? And then the next year they went ahead and did all those things, only losing to Georgia in the bowl game. But there is a bit of a difference between a team going 10-3 having some dumb losses on their record versus a team going 7-6 and having a lot of bad losses on their record, right? I almost wonder if we're about to see 2022 Florida State rather than 2023 Florida State, if that makes sense, right? I think this could be a good team. Their schedule is actually very easy schedule. Okay, you do have to travel to Stanford. That might not be fun. Miami, okay, not that bad either. You have Rutgers. Rutgers could be good this year, maybe. Boston College, Georgia Tech, that's definitely winnable. Syracuse, definitely winnable. Duke, winnable. Virginia, winnable as well. Marshall, winnable as well. Vanderbilt, maybe a little sneaky there. I mean, that is Diego Pavia and Jerry Kill, right? Don't forget that. But outside of that, though, everything else seems pretty winnable, right? So I don't know if I fully believe this team yet. I think there will be some value spots on this team, maybe as a short dog or a small favorite somewhere that you could bet on them. I'm not. I kind of SMU as ACC champs better than them. For some reason, there's something about this team that I don't want to. I don't like this team as much as other people do. It's a good team. I'm just a little lower on this team than I think most people.
Yeah, fair. And I guess I like maybe just again the opposite of SMU, like the season win total more than the ACC champs at 12 seems, I don't know, almost fair. But man, if they can just avoid the dumb losses or even just the multiple dumb losses, I think. And I'm counting on Marshall just being bad this season. I've just been a skeptic of that guy for a while. NC State, I hadn't given much thought to until our futures pod, and I'm probably going to disagree with you since you were making a strong case for him. Brendan Armstrong is replaced by Grayson McCall. I need to see whether he's a fit with Robert and I, or you're more X's and O guys than I am. The Robert and I version under Dave Doran. The offense just wasn't as awesome, I don't think, as I'd expected last year. What did I get him on the offensive line? So they had a lot of first. Yeah, I guess if you look here, you've got a
Mm-hmm.
big improvement metric, and you've got basically when these two numbers are the same, that means that basically you've got a lot of guys returning whose first action as a starter was last season. So there should be a lot of improvement there. The defense should be good to pretty good. Dorn's offenses tend to be pretty solid year over year. They've got, let's just look here. They miss Florida State, miss
Huh.
Miami, and
Yeah.
yeah, geez, very kind schedule. I guess my hesitation boils down to Grayson McCall. I just don't know if if he needs Jamie Caldwell in his
Chadwell.
life. Chadwell,
Yep.
pardon me, in his life. And I just last year was so bad, but I don't want to make Robert and I pay for the sins of Tim Beck being Tim Beck. So I don't know. I'm definitely just wait and see on this one. But you can go ahead next, Josh, since you're pretty bullish on this team.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I like Grayson McCall and Robert and I to be better this year is that they really loaded up at the skill positions in the transfer portal. So they got Noah Rogers coming in from Ohio State. He was a former 5-star. He'll be, I think, a redshirt freshman this year, so he's still young. But they bring in Wesley Grimes, who is a pretty high-level recruit at Wake Forest. And then they have DJ Collins coming back. They got KC Concepcion, who was like a stud, true freshman wide receiver last year, do-it-all guy. And then they got Jordan Waters from Duke at running back. And so and then they got Justin Jolie, who's like a sneaky good tight end from Connecticut, but he's got a lot of high, kind of like really good advanced metrics and super athletic guy. I mean, you see these pieces of like when a Robert and I's offense is good, you got this like Swiss Army knife and like what KC Concepcion is. You got a top outside wide receiver like it did Dontavian Wicks when he was at. You could have that in Noah Rogers, and then you got this other kind of hybrid tight end like an Aronde Gadsden that he had at Syracuse. You got that in Justin Jolie. So you see where these pieces could fit together to where it's like, all right, now Grayson McCall is just a point guard, right? Like he's just getting the ball out. And I think Robert and I, again, when his offense is doing well, I don't think the quarterback's making a lot of decisions, and it's pretty simplified. It's like, all right, I'm going to scheme it
Right.
up, and I got a guy to throw for you to throw to. And I think for Grayson McCall, he can thrive in that type of system. The real question, though, I think about Grayson McCall is like, this kid like never throws for anything other than like 28 or 2,700 yards ever. And so I'm like, can he actually be a dynamic quarterback? I think it's a good question in that sense of he can have the high completion percentage. I don't know what his ceiling is, but man, I like the offensive line. I like the talent at the skill positions. And I think Grayson McCall is good enough to distribute the ball. And I just look at the schedule and I go, man, like, other than in conference, at least, it's don't worry about any of these teams
Like
on
as
their
easy as it
schedule.
gets, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't really appreciate that until I did this. That's what Jackson was saying in the Futures Pod. He's look at this conference schedule. I hadn't really broken it down, and now it's like, man, they must have some friend in the league office or something.
Yeah, totally. And this is what we were looking at with Louisville last year, right? Even like when we're talking about them, we're like, oh, they could make the conference championship not because they're so talented, but because their schedule's just so soft. And that's what I look at when I look at NC State and Virginia Tech. I just go, man, these are pretty soft schedules, which could lead the way to them potentially getting paths to the conference championship game.
Yeah, and they got just their non-conference is easy too. You've got Tennessee. Okay, that's not easy, but
Right.
the rest, Western Carolina, Louisiana Tech is struggling, and Northern Illinois is like at best like a mid-MAC team.
Yeah. Again, this is another
Gee,
team that you're like, hey, find me the 3 losses. Again, Tennessee, Clemson, I could totally see that. But the rest of the schedule, it's pretty easy. There's not, and I think NC State's the type of team that they typically win the games they're supposed to win because they're really
yeah,
well coached.
yeah. A good nerd stretch of the schedule there between Cal, Stanford, and Duke.
And Georgia Tech and North Carolina. All those are
Yeah,
good schools, man.
yeah.
Don't mess with the
All right.
ACC's academics.
Yep,
That's why they brought in Cal and Stanford.
that's it. Yeah. All right, Robert. What do you think about the Wolfpack?
Yeah, the Wolfpack, NC State's did pretty good for quite a while. Like again, not top team, but good team 8-win, 9-win teams for a while, right? He does less with more, right? You go out in the transfer portal, you get Brennan Armstrong, you get 9 wins. That's far better than I thought you were going to get out of that season, right? They seem to be able to find stuff and then make it work, right? But they've gotten Grayson McCall at a significant discount because of his rough season last year, which I don't think was completely his fault, to be very clear about that. So you get him at a discount. You get some good pieces. I don't see this. The thing is, this team could make the ACC championship game because again, if this doesn't go well with Clemson, then this team is suddenly like 10-1 or 11-1, with the exception of maybe North Carolina, maybe Georgia Tech. But like, if you beat Clemson, or assuming you lose to Tennessee, if you beat Clemson, you might only have 1 or 2 losses at the end of the year. Now it should be good enough to get to the ACC championship game. So I think there's a lot of pieces here of what like the question is their pieces are there, but like how much can they get out of them? Is this just going to be another okay, we go 10-2, or is this going to be like we can get to 11-1, right? Or we can push through and get to the championship game? Because the thing is, for some of the other teams, if it's against like, say Florida State or SMU, they will have a pretty rough schedule to get there, right? You're coming off Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech, and then North Carolina, right? You could have a pretty favorable end of the season there, right? North Carolina we're low on this year. I don't know. I think 7-1 is it's a little much, but I think this team, if there's a team that's going to sneak into the conference championship game, it'd probably be North Carolina.
North Carolina State, you mean?
Yeah, North Carolina State. Sorry, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if you were suddenly just turned into a Max Johnson believer.
No.
All right. Before we move on, I just got to say I've already prepped Robert for this in our Big 12 preview. Josh, if you want to laugh out loud, don't feel bad. I'm a big boy. I can take it. I Stanford this year.
Troy Taylor, man, he'll make you a believer.
Yeah, I mean, he did a total year zero last year. I believe in this guy, dude. He was 23-1 in conference in 3 seasons at Sacramento State, 3 championships in 3 seasons. I'll put it this way, and this might be just a bullcrap kind of justification here, but as much as they like tore it down to the studs last year, the fact that they didn't take a step back in a year zero, I'm encouraged by that. And you had a quarterback making his first 10 starts of his career with everything new. I mean, everything new. What I love is they retain 87% of their rind from last season. This is just like, you see this, like, just a lot of classic signs of, you can see them just below the surface. They retain a lot. You've got a lot of returning starters at elite level, and they all went through a learning curve. Again, learning curve here, a learning curve there. Just a total year zero. I love that. The dreadful offense should be better. Again, you've got a huge improvement metric from last year. What did I say? Oh, yeah. Between here to here is just absolutely... It's, welcome to the ACC, guys. You want to get punched in the face like 5 times more?
Yeah.
Clemson we're not high on, but that's not a fun place to play. Virginia Tech we're high on. Good luck with this. Sometimes they're up to the task against Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's going to be really good. We're high on SMU. And then NC State we talked about is going to be tough, and Louisville I think is going to be good. That's a lot of your season, man. So I think this is going to be the Classic a lot better, but you're not going to see it in the one loss. In the Big 12 preview, I called this as my upset. I like them over TCU. TCU is a little shaky for me. You got Andy Avalos, new DC, who's probably going to fix things there. But I just think Stanford's going to be like a step ahead of them the whole game on offense versus a TCU defense. I want to bet this. The over, although the market believes in me to a little bit. If you say that this stretch is just a death march, you've got... I like them against Cal. I love them against San Jose State. Cal Poly is definitely a win. They can beat Syracuse. I'm going to be watching this kind of, as a USC guy, I would never imagine saying this, but I'm going to be watching this as a fan of Stanford. The pieces are there all underneath the surface. So I'm just going to say now, I like this team in 2025 to make a bowl for sure. All right. Like I said, I prepped Robert for this op, but you're convinced as well, Josh?
Yeah. I think everything you said is dead on with them. And if they beat TCU, then you have to bet the over on this, because I do think that they, Cal Poly, that's a win, right? Yeah. Syracuse, that's at least a 50-50, if not 60-40 for Stanford. Like, I'm not a Syracuse believer at this point. And then you got Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest is not going to be very good this year. And so that could be a win. And then you got Cal and San Jose State, that both of those. So you got at least like what, 5 games that could be 6 games if you include TCU. That could be 50-50s. If not, they're gonna win Cal Poly. They're gonna beat San Jose State, in my opinion. And I think they beat Wake Forest. So then they just got to beat one of Syracuse or TCU or one of those teams. So I can totally see that. I can see them beating SMU potentially, like coming out to Stanford. You just never know with some of these like games where teams are going to have to travel across time zones. I just don't know if we're going to be able to predict those and how that's going to affect some of these teams. But yeah, the people just like you, the people that I respect, I like see Stanford on trajectory up this year. So yeah, I really like that. And the win total's like so small. It's like Colorado last year. So these are the ones that are easier to take a shot on for the overs for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Robert, are you joining the cult here?
No, I actually am. I really don't hate this team. Yeah, last year was rough, right? It was very rough. You had a lot of rough games, specifically against USC. That was one of them, 56-10. But you beat Colorado, and Colorado was like not bad. They were bad, but not that bad last year. You were 12-point dogs to them. You beat them in double overtime. You also beat Washington State. Again, another not bad team, right? So you played up to some of these top teams. There's some bad losses on the schedule, like when they lost to UCLA 42-7, but they were competitive with Washington. They lost that game 33-42 while being 27-point underdogs, right? That was when Washington started letting randomly start for a couple weeks let teams be competitive with them. And I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but there was a stretch where they did. This is the thing. And Josh has a really good point there too, right? I'm looking at this schedule, right? TCU's got to come out west to play them. Not Texas to California, not that bad. But Virginia Tech, that's the other side of the country. SMU, okay, that's to Texas to California, not that bad. Wake Forest is, I believe, in either Tennessee or Kentucky, right? It's one of those.
It's North Carolina. Yeah, so it's across country.
Okay, it's close enough. No, I'm not the greatest with my U.S. college geography, but okay. But again, that's actually worse, right? That's even further on the other side of the country. Louisville, again, that is in Kentucky. That's again, watch for some of those games, right? Like especially a Jeff Brom on the road in a game they should win. That's when you like blinking red lights. You're like, don't do this. That's the thing. So there's some options for them to pick off some teams, right? I remember watching that game when Ashton Daniels was just carving up that Washington defense. I was like, what is happening here? Just in some of those, they did some insane things, especially against Colorado. I remember it wasn't like a 90 some odd yard passing touchdown where this guy was wide open and they did some insane stuff. Now, I think some of that's coaching, some of that was them not expecting it. But if this guy builds programs, and it's very clear he does, he was starting from very little and they're returning a lot, and I think they might be able to actually do some damage this year. And I wouldn't rule out like a 6-6 bowl for this team this year. I think that's even a possibility.
More bullish than me.
Yeah, wow. Man, he just took us both and just took it up a notch. I love it. Hot take.
Yeah. All right. The rest of the ACC here. So just a minute or so on each of these. Duke, they lose Mike Elko. They lose Riley Leonard. They lose a lot of their offensive line and defense. Manny Diaz is not exactly walking to Miami in this spot. I think this is going to be a rough season for them. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, for sure. I think Manny will be able to do some stuff there long term, but I don't know what you have offensively right now. Malik Murphy's coming in and he's not much. It's a simple system. Jonathan Brewer, the new OC, is a Rhett Lashley disciple, but they're gonna have to rely on Jordan Moore to do a lot at the wide receiver position in order to even move the ball. Because I don't know what else they have. Duke could defensively, like maybe there's some pieces there, but it feels a lot to overcome.
Yeah. I'll join in on that. I think Manny Diaz long term, that's a great pick. I like that, but that's long term, right? There is a lot of pieces gone, and again, when Elko left, he probably took a lot of the hardware with him. Obviously Riley Leonard went to Notre Dame, but I'm sure basically anybody who was good or up and coming, and even recruits in the pipeline probably transferred to Texas A&M based on that, right? It's going to take at least a year or two for Diaz. I think Diaz was definitely overlooked as a head coach at Miami. I think he was fired because they thought they could get Mario Cristobal. I think if you couldn't get Mario Cristobal, they probably would have kept him. And I think that's a bit unfair to him. I think he was okay, but I think they're like, oh, we're going to get Mario Cristobal. It turns out that maybe wasn't the best decision. But I think he was definitely okay as a head coach. He was definitely a little underlooked there. But again, he's going to be underlooked this year. But give it a year, and then we'll like Duke. This is going to be like a 3-win season for Duke, and then they're going to we'll be talking about them next year.
Yeah, agree. Cal, new offensive coordinator. I think he's from North Texas. Is that right? And the quarterback is from there as well, which is just about as weird as like Jake Spavital coaching there last year. I don't understand. I don't know. Cal's just on the hamster wheel, it seems to me, and I have no reason to. Probably a better defense this season, but that's about it. Just Wilcox is what he is, and he's a good guy and a pretty good coach, but that's about it. I don't really. This team doesn't get my pulse racing. Either of you guys?
Yeah, no, yeah. I think all the things you said. They're a straight, potentially 6-win team. That's about it. Although they do face some pretty tough defenses this year. It's not a forgiving schedule. I say that. So, yeah, not a huge Cal fan this year.
Yeah, Cal is like Stanford. I guess it fits in more to the ACC if that makes sense. Cal just feels like it's like, why are you here? Stanford, okay, you're with Duke, you're with some of the more elite academic universities, and Cal has academics, but it feels like Stanford's the better fit. Cal, it's just they had to go somewhere, but it just seems weird that they just feel really out of place here. And maybe I could be wrong on that. Maybe they could be okay, but they were always a middling Pac-12 team, and I'm not seeing a ton of upside for them this year. Not the kind of upside I'd see for Stanford. So I see again, like this is a 6-6 team. They could do some stuff, but I just see them as like worse Stanford.
Yeah. All right. Pitt. You probably know this better than me, Josh. Okay, I see some pieces here of the offensive line returning, although the offense was dreadful. Their quarterback, was he like sneaky good? The guy that's returning? His apex is just like out of this world for a first time starter.
Yeah, Nate Yarnell. There's not. He hasn't played a ton that I remember. They were so bad last year that I just didn't pay a ton of attention to him. I will say this: if he was good, then their OC coming in is like pretty sneaky good. Cade Bell, he's coming in from like Western Carolina, but at the FCS level, he put up some really good offenses, and his dad is an offensive guru from Valdosta State at the D2 level. So this could be a team that like I can't imagine Pat Narduzzi letting them like air it out. See, this could be the offensive coordinator is there to pull out to maximize the skill sets of the players in that offense. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, also breaking news. Hey, they had 2.5 games of bad luck last season, which is also known as your coach finds ways to do stupid things at the end of the game and lose games he shouldn't. And get an
Sounds about
award
right.
named after him.
Narduzzi.
Yep. Anything for Pitt, Robert?
No, this is just a team that seems to be floundering, right? I don't see any positives. Okay, the O-line's not bad, but again, basically starting fresh at quarterback again. A lot of questionable calls as to who they've had playing for quarterback for them since Kenny Pickett. Defense, not great either. I don't love this. This looks like another 3-win season for Cal, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Is Georgia Tech kind of turning into a Justin Wilcox program that's maybe a little more interesting? The only thing I see here is, okay, they've established themselves as a running offense. That's it. Maybe the sneaky pull off an upset now and then. They do return. I do like the metrics here on the offensive line. But again, nothing here that interests me nearly as much as the teams we've talked about in more detail. Either of you guys?
What I noticed here is they got 3 bye weeks during the year, which is okay since that week 0 game against Florida State, but their schedule is brutal. Georgia, NC State, Miami, Virginia Tech. That end of that schedule has got to be Notre Dame. The last 5 games of the year are just killer. And then you got Louisville on the schedule too, and Florida State. You hit every tough team, no matter how good they are. I just don't see them improving in their record from last year.
Yeah. Robert, anything on your guy Brent Key?
This was a team that like they have not like the thing was we talk about Georgia Tech. They were obviously in bad shape. Fired their head coach. Interim coach came in, did some stuff. People were like, this is great. And then they're like, let's keep that guy. And okay, that's generally, to be fair, you can't really knock a program for doing that because worse decisions have been made in that scenario where they're like, oh, let's bring in this old guy who used to come here. That sounds like a great plan. That's happened so many times where they bring someone who's their alma mater. Programs have made worse decisions, but at this point, I don't know what this Georgia Tech team is. They still have Haynes King, so they could do some stuff, but this team again was competitive in some games. Like obviously Miami, they were 20-point dogs. They won that game outright. They were 1-point underdogs at Virginia, blew them out. They beat North Carolina, so they played up to their competition in a lot of the games. But again, like randomly in other games, when against Bowling Green, they were 21-point favorites. They lost by 11. This is the kind of stuff where it's just like, what is this team? How is this team able to beat North Carolina and at 1 point Heisman favorite, third overall draft pick Drake May? They beat them, but then they get annihilated by Bowling Green when they're 20-point favorites. But then they beat Miami outright as 20-point dogs. You go ahead and tell me what this team is. It makes no sense what this team is. They're probably going to randomly beat someone this year. Who do they play that's good here? They play Notre Dame. Maybe they could beat Notre Dame. Who knows? That'll be like Notre Dame's loss. Will be like to Georgia Tech, and then that's it, right? Then they'll lose to everybody else. It's such a weird team, and until they figure out what they are and what they want to do with the ball, and there's no I really agree with that whole identity thing. They're not good, but not great. But some weeks they're the best team in the league, and then other weeks they're not. Such a weird Jekyll and Hyde team, this Georgia Tech team.
Yeah, I agree. Virginia, all you have to say is Tony Elliott, Tony Muskett, Anthony Colandrea. It's the same thing every week. I don't know what he's thinking. And Phil Steele has him starting Muskett again, so they go to the rest of the ACC. It's just we've argued that one to death, and you're shaking your head too. What is this? Do you have any insight what he's doing?
The only thing I can think is he just doesn't trust Colandrea because he's clearly gives them a higher upside in that offense. His ability to sling the ball. He may throw you 2 picks, but he's also going to create plays. But they love Tony Muskett. That dude must have pictures of his coaches or something. He's got some kind of bribery because the love that they have for that man, for the limited production that he's given them, I was like, of course, like anybody could throw the ball to Malik Washington behind the line of scrimmage and let Malik Washington go run it. Come on, what are we doing here with Tony Muskett?
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to get hype about that. Sorry.
That's you. Just are you ready for another season of that, or do we have to make the own Tony Muskett segment, Robert, or do we skip the whole Virginia thing this season?
Definitely for this podcast, maybe, but this will be definitely a theme we bring up. Again, I kind of think Tony Elliott's going to live or die by this decision for quarterback, for obvious reasons. And I would take the guy with the high upside, but apparently they have decided no.
Okay, yeah. Syracuse. I'm interested to see what Fran Brown's going to do. I really like that in year one he got Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord actually had a really good stretch of football towards the end until Michigan basically made him feel like basically stuffed him in a locker. Kyle McCord is pretty good, and I like a young guy like this in a year 1, so he can grow with the program. I think it's going to be a rough year, but longer term, I think that he's apparently recruiting really well. So that's it. Nothing but, I guess I've had them on the wrong end of other teams, or they might be on the wrong side. Does Stanford play Syracuse too? I don't know if they do. Curious.
They do.
Good game. Yeah. That'll be interesting to see. Be curious to see who's favored in that one. So nothing this year except for that kind of game. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah. No, I still don't understand why Kyle McCord is the starting quarterback for Syracuse. It just doesn't make. McCord was fine last year for Ohio State. Okay, yes, not C.J. Stroud level or Justin Fields level, but fine. I don't understand this. He's gone. And not even, there's other teams in the Big Ten that I would have thought would have scooped him up immediately, but he didn't even fall to them. He fell to a team in the ACC. And not even a good, it's not like, I thought Florida State would be like, yeah, Florida State should have taken him. Clemson should have taken him. Rutgers, Illinois, the other orange team from the Midwest, should have taken him. There are so many other teams that I thought he would have fallen to rather than Syracuse. That wouldn't have been like, I don't understand how he got to Syracuse. Was he like just driving and then the car broke down? He's like, I got to make a decision which school I'm going to. I honestly don't understand. I really don't understand how he ended up here. It really makes no sense to me. And Syracuse has so many structural problems in many ways. Obviously, the quarterback last year, I can't remember his name. I didn't have it here. It was Garrett Schrader. Yeah, Garrett Schrader, yeah. They have not been good at quarterback the last couple of years. It's been really rough. This is an improvement over that, but this team is not great, right? If you're that level where you had Ohio State, and to be fair, you did have Ohio State. You had Ohio State one touchdown drive away from going to functionally the national championship game. That was against Michigan. If you don't throw a pick there, you get a touchdown in that drive. You win that game. You very likely beat Iowa. Then you go on to, then you play Alabama. You could definitely beat Alabama, right? Okay, I'm not going to try to extrapolate too much, but you've had that drive ended differently. You have yourself on a path to the national championship game, and then that guy's out just playing for Syracuse. I really don't see. He started slow last year, but not that slow. I'm interested to see what Syracuse can do, but I'm not high on Syracuse this year. But we'll have to see.
Not sure if there's any real reason to watch them this season, but maybe next season. On the other hand, this could be just like it could be fun, or it could be just like nope. Thomas Castellanos under Bill O'Brien. I could okay. You're shaking your head no. You could see where it could be fun. Oh my God, this is working.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing about this team that I haven't interested in. Maybe there's just like one game where it's Twitter is just, oh my God, Boston College are hanging with and Castellanos it's the good version of him. That's the best case for this. Otherwise, I don't really have an interest. But that could be the storyline for this team. Is that about it for you guys?
Yeah, I have never seen Bill O'Brien cater his system to his players. I thought even when he was the OC at Alabama, I just don't think he did a good job of taking the strength of that team. And the way he used Jahmyr Gibbs to me was absurd. And now you see him in the NFL and thriving in the way that they use him. And so can O'Brien fit his offense to Thomas Castellanos' skill set, or is he going to make Thomas Castellanos become a pocket passer essentially who scrambles on non-designed runs? And it's man, and I love Castellanos. His skill set is so much fun, but I just question whether O'Brien will have the wherewithal to really, put this offense, put the skill set, put the design the scheme around the skill set of Castellanos. Otherwise, I like the wide receivers they brought in. I like the rest of their skill position players in that offense. It's just, man, that's a weird fit for me between those two. And so hopefully Bill O'Brien can adjust.
Yeah. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, Bill O'Brien has fallen quite a large way here from obviously head coach there at Houston. I think he had a stop as the offensive coordinator for Alabama. Then because of that, got promoted back up to the NFL to be the New England Patriots offensive coordinator, which, to be fair, didn't do a particularly great job there with Alabama, to be fair. It was mostly because that was... What year was that? That was the Bryce Young year, right?
As 2022.
Yeah, that was the year. Did they win the national championship that year?
No, Georgia did.
No, Georgia did. That's right. Yeah, they lost to Georgia in, I think, the championship game as well, right? I just thought that I didn't give him that much credit for it. I was a bit low on him going to New England Patriots last year, and then that went really badly. Partly, I think, because of him. Partly because he just had literally nothing to work with. There was literally no pieces there at all. That was honestly, he might have better pieces this year at Boston College. That's not even a joke, honestly. Some of the wide receivers at the New England Patriots. No, honestly, go look at their wide receiver room last year. It was horrific, honestly. It was really bad. Thomas Castellanos did some fun stuff last year. There was a lot of really fun things that happened with him, especially in some of those later games. But then there's also the bad games, right? I don't know. I'm not getting behind this team. I think this team is not particular. I think I'd be a lot more worried about. Yeah, he has some fun games, but what happens in those bad games? And then there's just nothing, right? I don't see Bill O'Brien as this mastermind defensive mind. I think he's more an offensive-driven coach. I don't think this is going to be the greatest Boston College team ever this year. I don't think so. It's going to take a couple of years to build up something.
Yeah, I think that might lead the conference in number of games that are broadcast on that weird channel that nobody gets. All right, last Wake Forest. You never know who's going to work in the claw fence, and now it's Hank Buckmeyer's term. Maybe not. Who knows? The defense still needs a lot of help. We'll see. I have no idea what to expect from this team, so didn't invest the time in digging much deeper than that because you just never know. What do you think, Joe?
How did Hank Buckmeyer fail up? Kid goes to Louisiana Tech, is not very good, and then lands in actually an awesome system at Wake Forest. But look, Buckmeyer at this point, the kid's going to run one too many times and get a concussion again. Unfortunately, he just can't protect himself. And
Yeah.
he's got clear concussion issues where if he gets tapped, man, he's out. So I'm also out on Bachmeier for those reasons.
Yep.
Yeah,
Robert,
it
anything on
wasn't.
Wake?
Yeah, it wasn't particularly great for them last year with Louisiana Tech with Bachmeier. He definitely, I thought he would be better than Louisiana Tech, and this is the place I thought he'd land last year, not after last year, right? That was a bit confusing for me. Wake Forest, I just think Clausen's been there for a long time now. They've had good years, it's bad years. The last couple of years were pretty good. Last year was not good. That was, what was that? Mitch Griffs, I think, was who they had last year. He's gone now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I think he's gone, or just
Yeah,
never
he's
going to be
gone.
allowed to start again. Yeah. That was really bad. A lot of interceptions there. So, I'm not particularly high on this team. I think maybe this might be this might be the end days on the claw fence here.
Wow. Such a happy note to finish on the team previews. Thank you, Robert.
The slow mesh is done.
Yep. All right. And with that, we get to the 3 questions. I'm punting on this one. I'm going to uncomfortably throw this to you, Robert. Who's the best Heisman bet in this conference? This is a tough one, man.
Can I bet
You
none
both
of the
Heisman
above?
team, by the way?
I maybe Preston Stone, maybe Preston Stone or Phil Maffa. That's it. I don't trust DJU. I don't trust anybody else on Clemson. I don't trust any. I don't even particularly like Kyron Jones that much. He might have a better year this year, but you need to be like a truly elite quarterback. Preston Stone could have the number for it. Phil Maffa is one on a kind of a short list of potential running backs that could get it. So I think those are the only 2 bets, but I'm not making either of those.
Oh, if you're just not going to pick one for the pod?
Fine, give me the quarterback, Preston Stone.
All right. And what's he at? What, 20 to 1?
I don't even know. Probably some insane number. Let's check. Let's see here.
Sorry, I didn't prep this.
You go ahead. I'll chime in with the number when I find it. 1 second.
All right. Then I'll throw it to Josh. Do you have any feelings on this one?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go. This is probably totally chalky within the Heisman futures, but I'm just going to go Cam Ward. I think he's the only guy in this conference that the team can be good enough if they hit their ceiling in order to go to New York. I don't see any of these other players or the teams that have the ceiling to be able to do that. And it's typically a quarterback for me.
Yeah, true.
Oh, I have the numbers. Preston Stone 100 to 1, Kyron Jones, which I mentioned 100 to 1, Cam Ward 20 to 1.
Man. Yeah, I'm gonna zig after zagging, and I'm gonna go with Ward actually, even though I've got a lot of questions. But like we said, John Cooper. Everybody's got a John Cooper in this league, so
Yep.
I guess to that point, if he's not the John Cooper and Mario just keeps it together, sure. All right, one upset in the conference. I will go first, and this is just on brand because it's so dumb. I'm going to go with, and I think this is an upset. Probably an upset now. I don't know if there's a look headline. Pitt over North Carolina. That's just the dumb. That's the one where Narduzzi really gets the fans mad. It's you beat these guys, and then he loses to who knows what. Fair, that's an upset. Nobody's expecting to get Pitt, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be an upset for sure.
All right. What do you got, Robert?
I just wanted to check one number. I think the one I'm going to go for is, let me just see here. Yeah, I'm going to go Stanford over Virginia Tech at home.
Virginia Tech?
It's a long road trip. That's a lot of air miles.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Josh.
Dang. I also want to go to Stanford with the upset, but not Virginia Tech. I'm going to go Stanford over SMU.
Whoa! Really? Wow.
Yeah. I think for similar reasons, I think Stanford's going to get one of those, right? I think they're going to get somebody that's coming out to them that they shouldn't beat, and I think they're just going to scheme it up in the right way against the right opponent. And so I'm going to pick SMU on that one just because maybe by that point SMU has hit a little bit of – we've played a couple Power 4 teams in a row. Maybe some of that catches up to them.
Their exhale game, like I call it, where it's like, oh, we're past that now. And then you exhale and you really just get
Yeah,
You
you
get
got
knocked out of you.
TCU, Florida State, Louisville, and then you got bye week and then Stanford. Like maybe they perform well in those 3 games, but they get beat up too. So maybe come back against Stanford, and
Wow.
Stanford beats them.
Man, okay. So we've each taken. I had Stanford over Baylor or over TCU in the Big 12. So clearly, we need to get Troy Taylor on the Week Zero pod before Stanford grabs the headlines this season because it's going to happen.
There you go.
Okay, this is the tough one because of the John Cooper factor. Robert, who do you have in the title game?
It's a tough call. Give me SMU versus. Give me Florida State. I'll take Florida State. It's chalky, but give me Florida State.
Okay. I'm going with both halves of my champs bet. I'm going SMU Virginia Tech, going way down the program to number 5 and number 7 on the entries there. And so, Josh, you were going to wrap up the ACC preview by choosing to play for the ACC title.
Not Miami. So we'll go NC State and Virginia Tech.
Wow.
Which I think that's probably a hard one to see. 2 programs are not typical. We'll call them blue bloods for the ACC. But to not have Clemson or Virginia Tech or Florida State in there, that would be a first in, I feel like, several years. That at least not one of them has made it. But yeah, we'll go NC State and Virginia Tech. I like the schedules there for them to set up to be able to go.
Good call. All right. And with that, we are done previewing the ACC. A lot more definition I have now. I thought this was just tricky, but surprisingly number of futures plays I think I might have in this conference. So, Josh, thank you so much. Robert, as always, it's been a pleasure. I will see you next week when we are doing the Big Ten, parts 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. And with that, thank you, everyone. We will see you shortly.
Yep.
Bye for now.
See you guys.